It's time to get educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. This is the Dr. Duke Show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. We've got a great program, so as we often do, we ask you to please hit that share button, and let's get this education party going to as many as we can. Today's show is sponsored by Mike Lindell and our friends at MyPillow. Now, this week, MyPillow is offering their Giza Elegance pillow down from $90 to just $30. I know enough math to know that's 1/3 of the price. Talk about a perfect gift for the post-holiday season. Simply use the code Dr. Duke, that's DRDUKE. Plus, you can save up to 66% on other items when you use the code Dr. Duke. Today, we start in the Windy City, where public school teachers in Chicago and their union have forced 300,000 children to stay home simply because they don't want to show up for work like everybody else in the country. And this is, I guess, terribly unsurprising. Teachers' unions. I mean, what does it take? If I posited to you that here we are in the early part of 2022, and there was going to be some entity in Chicago that was going to make Lori Lightfoot look like a hero, to look like an actual leader, you wouldn't have believed me, would you? But then along comes the Chicago Teachers Union, who are the best bad villains since Darth Vader.
What we do know for sure is that about 290,000 kids have been out of school in Chicago public schools since Wednesday, which means since the end of last year, because they were on the Christmas break. And basically, we knew this would happen at some of the big city schools. We didn't know that it would still be going on since last Wednesday. So the kids are going to be out of school for who knows how long, because, hey, the teachers' unions are very scared for the children, they say, but really, obviously, it is all for themselves. And this isn't the first time they've done this. They keep doing this. They've been doing it for over a year. In fact, you're probably going to want to close your eyes and plug your ears. I'm going to show you. Again, it's been 1 year, a solid year since 6. So brave teachers. Dance teachers put together a little montage of coming together to use their art form as a voice to express their desire to feel safe amidst the CPS's teacher return policy. They stand in solidarity with all educators at risk because no one should have to choose between life and livelihood. And here's how they portray their art.
Make it make sense. Safety is essential. Keep our students and our teachers safe. Safe.
1 year ago, they made that video. And where are we now? Pretty much the same situation. I just wonder now if the Phi-Ed teachers are going to get together, or maybe a different group of teachers, or the math teachers going to all get together and display their math numbers to show what's happening with COVID.
I find it extremely difficult to believe that watching the Phi-Ed teachers play kickball in the name of cohesion would be any more embarrassing than that.
You can't play kickball. That's racist, sexist, all those things. So you would have to.
What do they do?
I don't know if they use the lummy sticks. Remember the lummy sticks? Tap the lummy sticks together.
I'm not sure what does Jim look like at a Chicago public school? What are you able to do?
Jim's not allowed in public schools. He's a racist. Anyway, see what I did there? Moving on, the Chicago teachers, collectively, I guess, there was a quote that says they bragged. Chicago teachers bragged on Facebook about potentially being eligible to receive reimbursements for sick days they scheduled for last Wednesday, because obviously they knew in the new year, they're like, I don't want to go back to school. It's dangerous. Put in for sick leave already. And then with this whole strike and all that, hey, give me my sick days back for when I want to use them, even though I'm already currently not in school and could. They just don't want to go back to the classroom. That's what this comes down to.
Well, the Daily Wire reported at the same time that the Chicago Teachers Union had voted not to return to work, defying an order from the Chicago Public School Administration. So the public school administration in the city wants them back at work. Mayor Lightfoot wants them back at work. And the only one doesn't want them to stay home, that doesn't want to go back to work, is the Chicago Teachers Union. It just goes to show you in a place like Chicago to this day how utterly the state is run by corrupted unions just like this. I mean, and I mentioned at the opening of this spot, really shocking that Lori Lightfoot, who's got every single thing wrong in her term as mayor, it's the bloodiest place to be if you're an African American. Black on black violence is through the roof. The city is literally collapsing around her, and yet she takes a hard stand on this. I suppose we ought to congratulate her for this, but what power does the entire administration, city administration of Chicago have if they can't get these teachers back to school? They have contracts, right? Just don't pay them, for God's sake. Just get 1 week without pay, everything will change. I don't know why this is so complicated. They're in violation of the contract. They're in violation of what the city has decreed. I guarantee you if this goes before a judge, they're going to lose. So why not punish them at the highest level? Think about how draconian you are about people who aren't masked. Miss Lightfoot, you're going to do what to people who refuse to wear the mask? You're going to arrest them, you're going to dox them, you're going to make sure they get fired from their jobs. And this is much worse. These are people who will not show up and do their job in a public school system funded by taxpayers to give education, real education. It's a mandate to their children under their care. If you can be such a hard ass with the unvaxxed and the unmasked, surely you could come on just a little bit stronger with these feckless teachers unions.
Well, after we come back from break, we're going to take a look and see actually what Mayor Lori Lightfoot had to say.
Are you a fan of the show? Consider joining the Patriot Club. Your tax-deductible donation of $99 a year keeps us going. Simply visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us to pledge your support and receive our signature tumbler as a token of our appreciation. We've got much more to come. Stay with us.
So as we said before the break, we were talking about Mayor Lori Lightfoot and how her run as mayor in Chicago has been horrific. But she's finally standing up, at least to the teachers union, using her mouth to say, hey, get back in the classroom. Let's take a look.
We will not relent. Enough is enough. We are standing firm, and we are going to fight to get our kids back in-person learning.
A frustrated mayor says students and parents are being robbed of their rights and schools are in fact safe. But more than 70% of CTU's membership disagrees, voting to resume remote learning.
Right now, going into schools puts us at risk, puts our students and families at risk.
The city says teachers not showing up for class are participating in an unlawful strike. We spoke with one teacher who is showing up, but not showing his face tonight. He's scared of the pushback from fellow staff because he is for returning to class.
I've had students that have been suicidal. I've seen the worst of the worst over the last 2 years. I don't want to go back to that.
Some parents echoing that teacher's opinion, especially this single mother juggling multiple jobs.
I want to be her teacher for her, but I can't be. So, in-person learning for academic reasons is important, and then mental health.
But there are also many parents siding with the majority of teachers, not feeling in-person learning is worth the risk of catching COVID.
It's a record surge. There's a record of pediatric hospitalizations. Safety, as CPS has said time and time again, comes first, and I agree with that.
Oh, she agrees with it, does she?
But, all those sick kids dying. It's just ridiculous.
But what we have here, as we always have, is you have the teachers who clearly just would rather get paid to not teach your children. And then we have on the other side, we have the mayor who, again, has been a horrific mayor, finally standing up. But at the same time, Lightfoot says that, we've taken some action in terms of getting them, back. We'd rather resolve this at the bargaining table. We're considering all our options. We'll make a determination shortly as to what levers we're going to pull, depending on whether or not we make significant progress at the bargaining table. Why is there a bargaining table at this point? Like, teachers' unions, once upon a moon, just like unions in general, once upon a moon, had benefits. Now, they are just meant to get the teachers or whatever union it is, everything they possibly want. And we know that our public schools aren't providing when they are in the classroom. So what's the point of negotiating with terrorists. They're not terrorists, but why are we negotiating with people who have absolutely no desire to want to get back into the room? Now, that being said, there are specific teachers who do want to teach. And there are teachers you saw in that video. And there's another teacher we're going to talk about shortly here who actually crossed the picket line, if you will, to go in and show up for students. So this is not to say anything about individual teachers. This is about the teachers' unions, which I did notice in that video. They have an entire building for the Chicago Teachers Union. An entire building. For what?
And guess what?
What?
Everybody's at work at that building.
Oh, I bet they are. But I wanted to give a shout out to Joseph O'Call. He was featured on Fox News talking about how he wants to be in the classroom, and he crossed the picket line. And oh yes, he also has cancer, and he says, let's get back to in-person learning. And oftentimes when you have a disease or something tragic happen in your family, it gives you perspective on life and actually living. And he says, hey, we should be living and doing these things. What's really cool about Joseph is that he is a math teacher, an algebra teacher, and he has been in the classroom for decades at this point. He noticed decades ago that the most dangerous time for students is at between 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. So he decided, you know what? I'm starting a chess club to get those kids safely somewhere in. What chess is, if you've ever tried to play chess and you don't know the rules, it takes a while. And it's a very skilled mind utilizing game to play. And so take a look at what Joseph had to say.
Now we're again facing this remote learning that the union is demanding. And I feel that it's not really beneficial anymore to the kids. And to think that I'm handling 8th graders and they're about to graduate. My point is that a number of them are not even ready for high school if this is what's going to happen. So I'm concerned about the impact that it creates, the negative impact that it creates on my students.
And he's absolutely right. He's been in the trenches here with this remote learning and what it takes. And especially being a math teacher, you need to have the teacher with you, engaged with the individual students, at least understanding what's happening. Because to go from the public school where the education level wasn't the highest to go to remote learning, how many kids have gotten lost? And he acknowledges it, that they need to be back in person.
Well, and isn't it refreshing? The question I perpetually ask you in the Dr. Duke Show, story after story after story, month after year, we do this program. And when is the last time we've had anybody associated with the schools, from the level of the teachers all the way on up to these ridiculous unions and the Department of Education in Washington? How often do we ever hear somebody associated with teaching come out and say our kids aren't prepared? When is the story always about illiteracy, on inability to do math? When all these so-called teachers and their enablers are never even mentioning the fact that our kids' literacy levels, their ability to compete, their readiness for high school, let alone college, is at an all-time low. Got to give this teacher a lot of props. He comes out and says, I teach 8th grade math. Many of these kids aren't ready for 8th grade math. You having home school like this, online school like this isn't going to change anything for those kids.
Today's show is sponsored by Clean Start Hand Sanitizer. For an odor-free foam hand sanitizer that lasts 2 hours and provides 19 refills, visit freedomproject.com/clean. That's KLEEN to order yours today.
Halt. Before we move on to our next story, I just want to invite everyone, you, to watch our Wednesday show as we unveil our awards for the best and worst of America's public schools in 2021. Dr. Duke and I have compiled our top picks, and I don't know what Dr. Duke picked, but let's just say mine are the best. But we are looking forward to sharing all of our top picks with you this Wednesday on the Dr. Duke Show. So make sure you tune in. And then let us know, obviously, in the comments, if you agree with my picks, because you will. I don't care about his picks. But moving on, it's 2022, even though on Wednesday it'll be 2021 again for us, but it's whatever. It's the same old song, so far as, all the ridiculousness that has happened. And so ridiculous that, of course, the list includes New York, New York, where they decided to use their federal American Rescue Plan coronavirus, that's the key word in this, relief funds to push, obviously, critical race theory in all of their K-12 schools, because that's what they do. And this, obviously, was approved by our U.S. Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, and he said that the funneling of money that is basically being done, it lays the groundwork for the ways in which an unprecedented infusion of federal resources will be used to address the urgent needs of America's children and build back better.
So we now know that the Department of Education isn't really the Department of Education. It's the Joe Biden, whatever progressives want, Department of Change and cultural anarchy. What do they want to do? All that money that we had to turn over to the Department of Education for COVID protections and COVID awareness and blah, 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 not being used now for any of those things. So what are they using it for, Katie?
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory.
Yes.
So the health of your kids doesn't matter. The education of your kid doesn't matter. What matters now is all that money that you thought was going to fight the disease is actually going to racialize your children in the public schools.
Now, I want you to remember exactly what Cardona said, that we're going to build back better, and we're infusing, it's laying the groundwork, he says. As we go through and explain exactly what this plan says, it states right in what it is. Just remember that all that money into the tune of $8,995,282,324 went just to New York State for the Empire State's Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Plan, the ESSER. They spent more time coming up with the name of this than they do teaching your kids how to read, but that's neither here nor there.
And listen to what they say about their program, right? The plan actually states, quote, equity warriors are working to create school communities that are more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive than ever before. Many of New York's education stakeholders and their organizations have elevated this issue to the very top of their agenda. Again, anything about studying or learning or testing or preparation or excellence, no. Equity and inclusion. You know what that means, right? Equity means the lowest possible standard that every kid could reach, and inclusion means nobody fails how little they can read and write.
Well, okay, it's a 263-page plan. So, maybe there's some other things that you just didn't talk about. They say, culturally responsive and sustaining education initiatives help educators create equitable, darn it, they screwed up already. I was hoping they'd say something about reading, writing, but there's that darn equity word again. Equitable learning environments that affirm racial, linguistic, and cultural identities. Prepare students for rigor and independent learning. They're talking about rigor and independent learning within the context of their darn equitable stuff. Develop students' abilities to connect across lines of difference. Elevate historically marginalized voices and empower students as, agents of social change.
Let's be very blunt about this. The more ignorant the kids are, the more they'll believe any of this left-wing racial agenda. You want to believe that in America today, you don't have any opportunity because Whitey stole it from you. You want to buy any number of lies about what the nature of this culture is so you can keep kids to be absolutely dumb functionaries, simply little rage components aimed at the entire history of Western culture, not to teach them anything, not to make anything better, but simply to become little Antifa anarchists for socialist change.
And one more thing, if you don't understand all of what we just said, just know we're going to put a little fine point on here with the mission statement. This is the mission statement. To meet these challenges, individuals must start with the inner work of healing their own hearts and minds, finding the capacity within themselves to support healing for students, families, peers, and communities.
It's time now for some real education. We put the new year behind us a little bit ago, but it's never a bad time with all of our breaks and holiday festivities. Stop and think for a little bit about what New Year is, and that famous song, Old Lang Syne by Robert Burns. A lot of people don't know much about it. A lot of people don't even know what the words mean. Everybody wants to sing it at the holiday. Everybody recognizes that it is a Hallmark song. I mean, Christmas has got like 8,763 songs for it. New Year's, as far as I can tell, has one. So it might not be a bad to dive into a little bit about what this is all about. So Robert Burns, the Scotsman, the great Scot poet, in 1788, he compiled this from a number of folk sources. And you can see a picture there of our man Burns. Burns, as the Scots would call him. Old Lang Syne is traditionally sung to bid farewell to the old year at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. It is often heard at funerals also, graduations, and farewell or ending occasions, valedictories, for instance. Many branches of the Scouts, what we know today as the Boy Scouts and other scouting movements, use this song to close out jamborees and other functions. The text is a Scots language poem written by Burns himself in 1788, but based on much older Scottish folk songs. In 1799, it was set to the traditional tune, the music we have today, and it has since become a standard. The poem's Scots title may be translated into modern English as Old Long Since, and if that's too poetic, less literally, long, long ago, or days gone by, or times long past, or old times. Consequently, for Old Lang Syne, as it appears in the first line of the chorus, it might loosely be translated for the sake of old times. In fact, one famous Scot, Matthew Fitt, actually took the phrase in the days of Old Lang Syne as the equivalent of once upon a time. And in his version of Scottish fairy tales, rather than beginning with once upon a time, he begins in Old Lang Syne. And so it's about old friends and old relationships that at the end of the year we're thinking about or we're beginning to renew for a new year. And another thing we want to do is, before we move, is let's show you the actual lyrics, because that, particularly the last verse, people don't recognize. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot in these days of Old Lang Syne? And then you get the chorus. For Old Lang Syne, my dear, for Old Lang Syne, we'll drink a cup of kindness yet for the days of Old Lang Syne. Now look at that fourth stanza that people don't quite know. We two have paddled in the stream from morning sun till night. The seas between us, Lord, and swell since the days of Old Lang Syne. So there's a lot of great Scottish lore and history and odd poetry behind this wonderful little poem, and it's the Scots' contribution to global celebrating the name of the new year.
All right, before we go, let's show some love to our Patriot Club members. And today, we're giving the shout out to Kimberly from Bishopville, Maryland. Kimberly, thank you so much for supporting us. And that wraps up this show for Freedom Project. I'm Katie, he's Dr. Duke.
Until next time, stay old, Lang Syne, my friendies.